Alright guys, welcome back again to more Witch on the Holy Night. Looks like the secret's out and they know already that it's Sojiro that spotted them during the incident, if anything. So now Alko and Alice are planning something. I don't know what yet, and that's what we're here to find out. So if anything else, I hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you all for the love and support, and let's do this. Alright guys, welcome back. Few would notice if he were to suddenly disappear compared to a person of some renown. If she were to kill him, it would be as simple as wringing a cat's neck. It all served to just piss her off. It was too lucky, like everything was neatly handed to her. She wanted to just dropkick it right into orbit.
信じられない。私嫌がってる。これは違う。こんなの私じゃない。
Standing behind her, Alice heard all of them muttering. Nevertheless, she seemed to ignore it and said,
彼、首に布を巻いていたわね。
A wholly unrelated topic. Alko returned to her senses.
首？ええ。水泳部の首とかけていたのかしら。
Alice had put much thought into this, as if it had a deeper meaning to her somehow.
そういえば、あいつ初めて会った時も首に布巻いてたっけ？襟を行儀よく締めてるから目立たないけど。
The conversation turned to idle nonsense. And though it solved none of her current problems, it did help calm Alko's frazzled nerves.
サンキュー。落ち着いたわ、アリス。それと、気合も入った。善は急げ。あいつが言いふらす前に決着をつけよう。
Pumped once more, Alko turned her back to the school gate. For now, they would retire to the mansion and prepare for battle.
いいけど、いつ、どこで彼を殺すの?
She said quietly so as not to be overheard by anyone else. Normally, Alko had to rein in that side of Alice out in the open as they were, but this was far from a normal situation.
今日の夜、場所はとっておきの夢の国よ。
She gave a fearless laugh. A strangely pleasant sound like the kind one would make when meeting their lover. Her as she is now. Alright, we're up to the next chapter already. Night of the Witches. Alright, let's do it. Sojiro returned to his apartment on foot as per routine, under a blanket of clouds in the night sky. The rusty stairs of his apartment building clanged with each step. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the bicycles parked by the apartment building's outer wall. He debated the pros and cons of a bicycle, how much easier life would be versus the expense, the convenience versus the necessity, but in the end, decided one was not right for him just now. Clutching the bag of apples under his arm, he took out the key to his residence.
あれば便利だけど、なくて。
He tilted his head in confusion. More and more he found himself preoccupied with such random thoughts, when the real issue at hand was deciding what to do with the apples he had received. He placed the paper bag by the sink and switched on the lights. It was just after 10 in the evening. With the end-of-term exams just around the corner, he had come home an hour earlier than usual. As he made back for the kitchen to pick one of the apples to snack on, he found an envelope stuffed in his mail slot. The envelope had no name, return address, or stamp. Inside was a single piece of paper that had only the sender's name and a short message. It read,
話があるので、今夜どこそこのここに来られたし。大事なようなので、来るまでずっと待っている。言うまでもなく、他言無用。
A concise set of orders neatly written. It was signed Alko Aozaki. She had been considerate enough to enclose a detailed map of the meeting place. Puzzled, he cocked his head to the side and headed out the door. Afterward, upon the room's sole tenant leaving the premises, the envelope burst into flames and evaporated without a trace, as though it had never existed in the first place. That rhymed. It's so weird because he got a letter, or a note for that matter, from Aozaki, and it's so short and concise, like he didn't think to question it. He's like, okay, you know what? I'll meet you there, I guess. By the late 80s, Japan's post-war economic boom had somewhat stabilized, and the city experienced a period of steady growth. The city's modernization marched on, and the Japan Railway train station, a symbol of a new era, neared completion. In Misaki's neighboring town of Yashirogi, a new symbol of its own was about to be born. Yashirogi bred in Kitsuland. It was Misaki's worst investment. Years later, he would be dubbed the fool's gold of the economic bubble, a relic of a bygone age.
この町には夢とか遮奪さが足りない。
10 years ago, Yashirogi's renowned Tokitsu baking company ran factories all across the nation. Its proprietor was a middle-aged gentleman, then aged 56, by the name of Yurihiko Tokitsu, known affectionately by most as Topan. He took it upon himself to begin development on an estate on the outskirts of Yashirogi and broke ground on a recreational wonderland that he hoped to be the pride of Misaki City. The long-awaited opening came in 1981. After 3 years of investment, this local amusement park full of all kinds of hopes and dreams began its short-lived tenure. It covered more than 85 square acres. Its magnificent merry-go-round dazzled all who passed through the park gates. Its roller coaster twisted and turned about the edges of the park like a writhing Japanese dragon. Its Ferris wheel, packed beyond necessity with gimmicks, was said to have tested the limits of modern engineering.
完璧だ。遊園地に必要なものは全て積み込んだ。
Old Yurihiko looked upon its recreation and smiled. Only boosting his confidence was the fact that its grand opening was staged during a period of prosperity, the springtime of the world. But, in spite of this, they splendidly miscalculated the balance between aspirations and sophistication. Its mascot, Kitsy, was poorly designed and appeared like a cheap knockoff. The park was stuffed to the brim with bread stands. Even its impossible to navigate mirror maze seemed out of date from the start. There are no dreams to be had at Kitsyland, only nightmarish satire. Numerous trade magazines lambasted Kitsyland's shortcomings and customer attendance declined. There was even an incident where a 6-year-old strayed from his mother, had an accident, and nearly died. 1986, 5 years after the park opened. The situation had grown from bad to worse, and the park was hemorrhaging money. On top of everything, Yurihiko, who had bet everything on the success of mascot Kitsy, retired, and Kitsy's land's operation were officially in trouble. And thus, amidst the scorn of nearly all residents of the area, ended Misaki City's one and only amusement park. What's more, perhaps best described as a footnote to the debacle, the self-proclaimed Parisian artist who designed the mascot Toki Ulick was said to have snapped his brush in mourning over the closure of the park. Returning to the present. It was midnight, and Kitsyland of today was a shadow of its former glory. Like a doll abandoned in the corner of a toy box, the lonely park was illuminated only by the light of the town that continued to live around it.
なるほど。
Sojiro closed the Yashirogi guidebook that he had picked up on the way here. The story of its history was almost difficult to believe, but he supposed this is what people referred to as entropy. The park's front gate was unlocked. When he worked here the previous time, the iron fence was locked shut with a rusty chain, but the chain was nowhere to be seen and the gate left ajar. Following the map drawn in the letter, Sojiro quickly made his way inside.
急ぎのようなんだろうけど、こんな夜中に何なんだ一体。
Yeah, my guy, that's usually a red flag. Sojiro complained, quite out of character for him. It was probably because, in spite of his naivety, even he knew that something was amiss. Oh, really? You didn't think that an old run-down amusement park, abandoned no less, is the main location to meet, and you didn't think to question it until now? Though the park was abandoned, this was still trespassing. Unlawful entry, larceny, burglary. These were certainly not things or perhaps crimes that Sojiro was proud to do, but...
すまない。お金は払えないんだ。ただで入って申し訳ない。
Money, the real reason his conscience was gnawing at him. He clapped his hands in apology toward the statue of Kitsi, on whose eyes the paint had begun to aptly dissolve. Sojiro passed the mascot bleeding red paint from its eye sockets and began to walk the night park. The building's colors had faded. The collection of machines was rusted. The man-made residents no longer felt the passage of time. Even the ghosts themselves could not endure the disparity between this forsaken place and its previous grand stature. It was like a fossilized dream. These were the ruins of a paradise both created and abandoned by a man in reality. The economy had stabilized, and the standard of living was on the rise. Nobody was overly concerned with the future. These were the remains of a wild and exciting era. His breath turning to white wisps before him, Sojiro continued through the abandoned amusement park. Though void of human presence, this was not nearly as frightening as the darkness deep in the mountains. City suburbs can take many forms, but Kittyland was unusual for an amusement park insomuch as it had been built adjacent to a residential district. The park was surrounded by a forest, but even that ultimately was man-made. It was no different from the curtains on a classroom window. If he were to scale the iron fence encircling Kitsyland and break through the 20 yards of forested trees, he could make it back to the familiar townscape. Though the amusement park tended to arouse dread in the city folk, to Sojiro, it was a little different from the commotion and terror of downtown.
Areka.
The central plaza was as silent as a grave. According to the map, the meeting spot was west of here. Waiting for Sojiro at his destination was a rugged, imposing, magnificent castle towering before the backdrop of the cloudy night sky. Even for an abandoned park, it was a remarkable structure. If the roller coasters and the Ferris wheel were loud, intense attractions, this was, in comparison, quiet and easygoing. It was one of Kittyland's 3 iconic structures, and in a way, the wicked fortress that guided the paradise down the path of closure. Generally speaking, amusement park mazes generally fell into one of the 2 categories: a labyrinth which disorients visitors with its sheer size, and a house of mirrors which disorients visitors with optical illusions. Many of a labyrinth's guests enjoyed the brief sense of adventure that it afforded. Over the years, however, it would be usurped by the ever-increasing thrills of new attractions, such as the way of all trends, the curse of fads. The new must give way to the newer. On the other hand, the House of Mirrors was the time-honored beloved staple. Even within the confines of a classroom's dimensions, well-placed mirrors and well-directed light could both perplex and delight its visitors. In figuring in the cost of maintenance, a well-designed House of Mirrors could far outlive its labyrinth brethren. Even if both types faded into obscurity, they would remain a staple of what constituted an amusement park. However, that didn't mean that combining them would produce double the fun. Together, they transformed from entertainment into an uncanny realm from which those who dared to step within could never leave. In a similar sense, Kitsy's Mystery Tour Castle was the park's very own otherworld. Indeed, 5% of visitors ended up requesting staff assistance to get out. Modeled after European castles, it was greater than a football field in length, and the interior was further split into 3 floors. 2 floors above ground and 1 below, lined with mirrors from top to bottom, equal parts complex and vast. The maze demanded at least 30 minutes even from veterans. One visit was all it took to be struck by catastrophophobia for hours. It was this labyrinth that now stood in Sojiro's way.
真っ暗ってわけじゃないな。電気とかついてるんだろうか。
It seemed that Sojiro, unaware of what a house of mirrors even was, concerned himself only with its lighting. He checked the letter from Alko once more. The letter read, "I will be waiting in the first floor lobby of the House of Mirrors." That meeting place was definitely in here. There was something to see by at least, as he could just make out light faintly through the open doors. Putting aside his suspicions, he headed toward the entrance. The sound of his steps against the brick-laid path echoed faintly. He was far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The park's clocks no longer made tick nor tock, and the winter's bite no longer blew in the night. From within the silence, the stillness that would cause any onlooker to hold their breath, Sojiro stopped abruptly at the entrance to the House of Mirrors.
ところで青崎、そんなところで何してるんだ？
He called out, turning back toward the plaza. A sound rang out, as if someone had dove behind a garbage can and it fell to the ground in their haste. A short silence ensued. For a moment, the abandoned park returned to its previous hush. Resigned to her having been exposed, the girl appeared from her hiding place.
Oh.
His voice died in his throat as he took in the sight of the girl's familiar face and unfamiliar attire. This Alko, with her long hair flowing in the breeze, was different from the Alko that Sojiro knew. The resolute stance and posture she took exuded the strength of her will. She stared directly at him with a sharp-eyed, piercing gaze. Her eyes were glowing with a dim, phosphoric light, enough to give Sojiro pause that he might be hallucinating. An icy coldness and a girl's strength. Sojiro lacked a sense of danger, but the sense of imbalance caused even him to feel the malice in the air. It was as though the Yuki Onna spirit of folklore had climbed out from a ghost story and appeared here in reality.
Aozaki.
Instinctively, Sojiro took a step back. Surprised, he was starting to feel concerned. An unpleasant premonition rose to the surface, bringing with it a sense of anxiety. In spite of this, he felt obliged to honor urban etiquette by seeing if she was alright.
その顔を見るに何かあったのかと一応聞いておくんだけど。
Without acknowledging him, Alko took a step forward. Her figure, this atmosphere, Sojiro found himself recalling a recent memory. His twisted and knotted apprehension melted away and was replaced with a growing realization. The girl before him was very similar to someone he had seen before, that night in the park, though he had only seen her from behind. With increasing certainty causing him to swallow nervously, he noted that they might as well have been identical.
何をしていたかって話なら見ての通りよ。ここで獲物が通り過ぎるのを待ってたの。あなたが入ってから私も入って逃げ道をなくすつもりだったから。
Alko said, perturbed by the swift change in plans.
そうか。待ち合わせ場所は合ってたんだな。
That's what he was worried about. Like, oh, at least I made it to the right spot. Sojiro was mightily relieved he had not got the wrong place. It was unclear whether he felt confident about dealing with what was to come, or if he had simply failed to grasp the hopelessness of the situation. Alko ignored his obtuse response and continued.
私はね、しずきくん。嫌いな人とか憎い人とかは人並みにいるんだ。ただ、ちょっと変なのが敵になるやつの条件でね。
Cold emotion burned in her eyes. Her feet had already moved one step closer to Sojiro. Sojiro's sense of foreboding was growing stronger. Wondering if what he sensed was bloodlust, he retreated another step. Continuing as so, they maintained a distance of just 15 feet.
昔から私は嫌いな相手でも敵と思ったことはなかったの。でも逆に好きな相手を敵だと思うこともあった。理由は単純。
She held her right arm out. The light about her was no illusion.
当たり前のことだけど。私は、私の感情を乱す奴が敵なのよ。
Her arm moved again. It was instantaneous. Something shot past Sojiro in the blink of an eye, missing him by just a foot to his left. Before his eyes, a blue light, something akin to a fireball, had ignited from nothing. He finally understood what was happening.
ちょっと待った。今のは大変見覚えがある。
She ignored his dim-witted reaction.
外したか。
Alko muttered to herself. The fist-sized hole the blue light had made in the House of Mirrors crackled and smoldered. A shot like that could easily cave in a human skull in addition to burning it to a crisp.
こんな射程で外すなんて、アリスに見られたら自殺者ね。でも、これで分かったでしょ。二度目だものね。あなたにとっては。
Sojiro backed away swiftly. Things were beyond incomprehensible. He was close to losing the ability to think at all. All he could make out was the figure of the dependable student council president, or at least what he had thought was the president, and the memories of the park that night 2 days ago. He had never experienced anything like this, though most people living in a civilized country would have never seen anything like it either. A lethal weapon that could kill with nothing more than the pull of a finger had a way of suspending the ability of its target to determine between not just good and evil, but dreams and reality, past and future. And the more peaceful someone's life had been, the stronger that suspension was likely to be. All that one could think about was the fact that they were alive at that very moment. It was as if he was an unwritten character on a blank piece of white paper. There was no before, there was no after. There was only what came next. This was a very common thought process for anyone staring down the barrel of a gun.
あ、命乞いはやめてね。意味ないから。でも、恨み事ならご自由に。殺す側の義務として一言一句聞いてあげる。
By saying it was pointless, she made it sound more like she would not listen to what he had to say. However, Sojiro was in such a state of shock that it did not even enter his mind to speak up. All he knew for reasons unknown was that the girl in front of him wanted him dead.
嘘つきにも程がある。
You could have told me, Tobimaru.
飛び丸のバカ。何がそんな生き物はいないだ。実際いるじゃないか、こんなお化けみたいなのが。
Sojiro felt that if he had said that aloud, the second blast would come even quicker than the last, so he kept it to himself. Smart move, man. His mental expletives stirred in his mind from paralysis to mere panic. This response came not from confidence, however. Someday, out of the blue, someone is going to kill me. While it may have seemed like a baseless belief to hold.
でもそうだった。都会には殺人事件がある。ルールを破れば殺されるのは当たり前だってちゃんと教えてもらってた。
To Sojiro, the situation seemed to perfectly align with his inexperience understanding that the city was a coldly pragmatic place. As far as he was concerned in this moment, being killed by a classmate was not something to be so surprised by. In a society where murder was possible, he was able to accept this sort of situation as natural. Of virtually no concern was the series of events that led to Alko's aggression towards him. The only thing that truly confused him was Alko's blue fireball. Sojiro swallowed with an audible gulp. To anyone who may have been watching, it was the response of a victim paralyzed by fear.
そういうことよ。ようやく理解してくれたわね。多くは語らないけど、あなたにはここで死んでもらう。魔術は隠匿するものなんて言ってもそっちには関係のないことだし、単に運がなかったって思えばいいわ。大事なのは私があなたを殺したってことだけだから。
Done talking, Alko once again lifted her right arm. There was a hum like a machine. Blue light began to revolve about her arm beneath her sleeve. This was taking longer than last time, leading Sojiro to believe that it was going to be much stronger than the attack that was still scorching the wall behind him. The realization caused his panic to heighten.
いやなんだ、つまり 始末するとかしないとか、あの夜のお化けは青崎だったとか、都会は本当に込み入ってるとか、そういうことじゃなくて。
His thoughts became jumbled. His heart pounded like a hammer. This was no time to be standing still. He was not sure if the girl in front of him was really human. And more importantly, even if he could accept the events unfolding before him, when all was said and done.
待て、人殺しはいけないんだぞ。
Even if it was a fact of life in the city, Sojiro was not about to lie down and die.
分かってるわよ、そんなことは。
Sojiro's scream, still entirely oblivious, was just a thing to invoke Alko's full wrath. Time to go! Alko fired a barrage of blue magical bullets. In an instant, Sojiro dashed into the shadows behind him, into the entrance to the House of Mirrors. He darted feverishly down the hall. After a mere few feet, he was left completely out of breath. This was due to his shock at seeing yet another attack fiercer than the first, that he'd never seen in his life, and because he couldn't shake the thought that if he had moved even a second later, he would be dead. He could not afford to stop. The sound of merciless footsteps closed in behind him.
けど助かった。ここならなんとか。
He threw everything into his legs as he sprinted. A straight, narrow passage about 60 feet long connected the entrance to the main lobby. At this rate, if he could just make it to the lobby, he was sure he would be able to find as many hiding spots as he needed.
助かった。
He arrived in a large open space. This was the first floor lobby. There were 3 passageways. One led to the basement floor. One connected to the first floor maze. The other was a set of stairs leading to the second floor. Sojiro did not particularly care which one he chose, so trusting his intuition, he made a run for the first floor maze when... He smacked his head into a transparent wall.
鏡？
ええ、面倒だけど、それならフェアでしょ。追いかける方にも逃げる方にも有利不利がある。
A somehow cheerful voice echoed in his direction. There was no need for Sojiro to even turn around. In the very same mirror he had crashed into, he could see Aoko Aozaki's figure slowly approaching.
それと、1階の奥にある出口は封鎖しといたから。結界じゃなくて物理的に。やりすぎて封鎖っていうより瓦礫？土砂崩れ？どっちでもいっか。とにかく下手に出口に近づくと崩落に巻き込まれるから。生き埋めが嫌なら近寄らないことね。
Panicked by the impending footsteps, Sojiro groped for the wall. He could see the stairs to the second floor. He did not understand what Alko had meant earlier, but he at least knew that the first floor was not going to save him.
ま、私としてはそっちのが助かるけど。形式上、事故死の方が後始末とか楽だから。
Behind them was a creature beyond words. As she continued her idle taunting, she lifted her right arm ostentatiously. Even from above her clothes, one could see some kind of strange, incongruous pattern upon her body. The veins beneath her skin. They made it seem as though something inhuman was circulating her body. Whether out of pity or repulsion, Sojiro stopped for just a moment. His pursuer evaded his gaze.
ああ、これ？普段は塗り薬で隠しているんだけど、今日は特別。魔術刻印って言ってね、魔術師の証みたいなものよ。ほら、光が回ってるでしょ？これがさっきのスナップ。わかりやすく言うと弾丸の元。今日は調子いいし、私魔力を効率よく使うのだけは自信あるし。うん、あと30回ぐらいかな。さっきみたいな装着ができるのは。
Perhaps she was on an emotional high, for her voice had become frightfully friendly. The substance of the conversation could not have been any more unsettling, however.
そもそも何を言っているかよくわからないんだけど、青崎。
わからない？弾数はあと30発ってこと。
That sounds absolutely fantastic.
そこまで逃げ切ればあなたの勝ちよ。とりあえず今日のところはね。
今日はって明日もあるのかな。
Sojiro knit his brows. Alright guys, I'm gonna have to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. I know I'm leaving you guys at a cliffhanger, but holy cow, if anything else, we will continue this in the next one.